All right, everybody. We are live at 4 p.m. with a panel for one last show. Today will be our last panel in a row. We're not doing panels every day anymore after this point. That's why today's show is actually on my profile. We started on my profile before there was an OnCon group, and we're ending on my profile. I'm going to roll that intro. We will do panels in the future. I want to stress that. There will be panels. They just won't be daily. They won't be at 4 p.m., and they'll only be when they're topics that we want to bring the right people together to talk about and really dive deep into it. And we might even do like a good 2-3 hour block with some of these panels. But for now, for one last time, let's roll that intro for the 4 p.m. spot.
It's time to panel up. Let's see what we can learn, share some information, get the word out about the things we know, and answer the questions you need answered. So welcome to another great panel brought to you by comicbookadvocates.com and the OnCon Network.
Now, of course, you'll notice that it never says 4 p.m. That was because I always planned to have these not continue at 4 p.m. We only have that logo, so I will be taking that little shot out, replacing it, because now I do videos. I hate doing videos, man. I really do, but I love what happens when you make them. I hate them because of how long it takes, but you know what I love? I love that Dennis Knight is with us. Dennis, are you still there?
Thank you for having me. Yes, I'm here. Glad to be here.
You guys can't see him. I'll actually do a screen share so you can actually see that I'm not lying. This is not me being a ventriloquist. There is actually someone here with me. There we go. Dennis Knight. As we figured our way around a snafu, he'll introduce himself for you guys. Tell him who you are, Dennis.
How you doing, guys? My name is Dennis Knight. I'm a comic book writer and editor of Frontier Comics. I'm based in New York City. I've been doing this for about 8 years now.
And Phil, the Demon, tell him who you are.
Demon Phil, Comics and More New Jersey. You can find me on Comics and More New Jersey on Facebook and on YouTube. I'm doing interviews. I'm doing book reviews, and I do marketing for some of the crowdfunding projects that are out there. Hey, if you need help, if you need something, somebody to give you a hand on this and push you along a little bit, I'm your guy.
Sounds good.
All right. Today's topic is don't fake it, earn it. So what does that mean to you guys before I get into my rant here about what I think? What do you guys think when you just hear the term? And this all comes from the fake it till you make it slogan that has been thrown around by people who are professionals or the people we're supposed to look up to.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about. People who tell you to go do better, to understand right from wrong, yet they can't use the right word on their books. People like that.
Right.
So what do you got, Dennis? You start us off. What do you think when you hear that?
For me, it's just like, don't make yourself bigger than what you are. Like, the indie community is very, very tiny. Everybody knows everybody. So it's like, people already know like what you've done and what you haven't done. So don't make yourself, for example, let's say I did a con in California a couple of years back. I want to say Modesto Con. And a rumor was going on that I worked for Marvel Comics. And I had to set it straight. No, I did not work for Marvel Comics. I'm a Frontier Comics. I think there was like a typo or something, somehow, somewhere along the line, a rumor got out and people asked me, no, I don't work for Marvel. But like, you have to like, be very, very direct. You have to like nip it in the bud right then and there. If you let it spread, you let it grow, then it's like, it turns into a big, big mess. Just like you true to your work, you true to who you are. That's what it means for me.
All right. And Demon Phil?
So as far as I'm concerned, the first thing that I thought about as soon as I saw the title for this is you want to under promise and over deliver. You cannot go in here saying that I'm going to guarantee that anything's going to happen with anything that I'm doing. You cannot say that I'm going to go ahead and make this the best that it's ever been. You can go ahead and give it your all, put all your passion into it and everything, but be genuine with what you're doing. That's the best you can do.
Right.
Now, let me turn my camera back on. I had to run over and help Jax. He had scissors. So here it is, guys. And we're just going to knock Dennis out for a second just because it's a lot of white. I don't want to hurt anyone's eyes, but Dennis can still hear us. Don't worry, he didn't go away. We just took away the Dennis big white plaque. We'll get a picture of you and we'll bring a picture in you so people can really see who you are for when you're talking. So fake it till you make it is often this idea that you show up and you act like you belong. And if you act like you belong, suddenly people will believe you belong. That's not what you do.
That's not how this works.
Oh, and we see it. We see everyone who shows up and does that. You know, don't do that. I'm here to tell you that that's some of the worst advice you can be given to start your career. Honestly, you should be getting an education, as Randy would say, an education on comic books. Understand all of it. So that's what I want to start with. How did you guys start into comics and what you're doing, and what education did you feel you had to give yourself? For me, I read any book I can, went to Buddy Scalera panels. I went to panel after panel. It's not a lie to say I have now hosted 100 panels and I have gone to 100 panels.
Right.
So, like, I have absorbed things like a sponge. So we'll start with Dennis. Dennis, tell us what you have done to get there.
For me, it was a lot of research, a lot of online stuff, a lot of stuff on books. Big shout out to Andy Schmidt. I actually met him at last year's Comic-Con. Super nice guy. He had a lot of helpful books that really got me through, really got me started. Just like talking to people already in the business, people who like know creative artistic people who bounce ideas off. Just like a lot of interact with other people who are in the arts, things of that nature.
And Demon Phil?
As far as I'm concerned, I don't have an artistic bone in my body, so I came into this not being, a member of the comic community that way. I came in, I have a true love and a passion for comics. I've been collecting since I was, up to my father's knee or so. I don't know exactly how big I was whenever I started collecting, but that's whenever I started. It's the passion that's involved in it. But on top of that, and getting into this and getting to where I am now is because I actually spend a lot of time on panels, and I pick the brains of different creative people that are on here. Rob knows I picked his brain on some things. I picked a lot of other people's brains. I've been on a lot of the panels myself, trying to not only give my input on this, but actually absorb a lot of that out of it too. So that's what I try to do, is just absorb as much as I possibly can to go ahead and move forward and try to better myself with it.
Now, I'm going to go with Dennis on this one. Dennis, tell us about the panels you've gone to and why.
I've done a lot of work with Buddy as far as comic book school. They have a lot of great panels. Like Creative Connection is probably one of my favorite ones because it's a really strong networking panel that helps people get out of the shell, helps people interact with other creators, and hopefully get a project started. So I've done that for about 7 years now, and then I've done other panels and other conventions. I was in California. I did a comic books 101 panel where I gave people who worked on the basics of how to make a comic book, different creative teams, what the roles are, things like that. I've also done character development panels where I tell people how to develop the characters, how to make more robust characters, not just the flat, boring, good guy, bad guy scenario. Give your characters some depth, motivations, things of that nature. So I've done a lot of how-to stuff.
Now, Demon Phil, most of the panels you have done are online, or are they as well on in person at a convention?
I've done several of them at convention as well, which is kind of irritating at times because whenever you want to see a certain person, will go do a book signing whenever they've got it signed up. And of course, they got my favorite panels that I want to do at the same time. So splitting atoms is not always feasible. And I try to pick the best one that I want to go with that time. But I try to hit as many panels that have impact on what I'm doing. Back whenever I was doing my cosplay stuff, that was huge for me to go to cosplay panels because I would learn more about how to make these certain weapons or how to work on the paint, where I got very adept at going ahead and using spray paint to do my weapons and everything on there. What was available, what was not, what was allowed, what was not. So that was in cosplay when I was doing that. As far as comics panels, the only ones that I really ever went to were the ones that were especially around starting from the ground floor. I always like to know backwards of how it is. I can always go into my LCS and I can look at the books as they're already up there and make my own assessments by going in and looking through them. I like the backstory. I like to know what it was whenever it was pencils. I like to know what it was whenever it was in someone's head and no longer on paper, and then moving forward. So that's what I like to go with my panels.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So obviously education is more important than faking it, because faking it means you don't know what you're doing and you're going to make a lot of mistakes because you didn't pay attention. Brian K. Morris will be running a show about imposter syndrome. We did try to gear them up together, but it fell apart. So imposter syndrome is different than faking it till you make it. Imposter syndrome is when you feel like you haven't made it when you actually have. And I know that there was a moment in my career, and I just want to quickly talk on it and then move on past it, because I know Brian K. Morse is going to do a great job with this topic. But for me, there was that moment. I kept going to shows, right? I'd already had my comic out. I'd already produced a comic, but I kept telling everyone, I want to be a comic book creator. I want to be a comic book creator. I can even tell you the show. I was in North Carolina, not even a home show. And I remember everything that looked like that. I remember the exact moment. And I'll be honest with you guys, I don't know if I'd been saying it before this moment. This was the first time I'd noticed what I'd said. While I was doing my pitch, I said, I am Rob Anderson, and I am a comic book creator. I didn't say I wanted to be one anymore. And I suddenly, somewhere on that journey, even myself had known I had leveled up to being a comic book creator. And we just had the second book funded on Kickstarter, so I was feeling good about things. So I do want to stress, and I'm going to let you guys talk about that for a minute, that there is a difference between what we're talking about, not feeling like you've earned it versus faking it till you make it. So I'm going to let Dennis talk about it, because I know Dennis has had a long career as well and has been around, so he'll definitely give some great insight into this.
Well, for me, it was like, it's a weird, because like comics is such like a surreal thing. Like you see them in the stores, you hold them in your hands, but you don't realize you actually made one until you actually make it. So it's a process. It's an adjusting process, because like I remember when my first comic got published, I was in shock and disbelief. I couldn't believe it. Then you have to get over that initial shock and say, okay, well, I'm here now. What am I going to do with this opportunity? So you can either grow, educate yourself, surround yourself around seasoned veterans who've been doing it longer than you, learn from them. Or, like Rob said, you can fake it and think you're really bigger than what you are. It's really up to the individual.
Demon Phil?
As far as I'm concerned, I'm still riding cloud nine on this one. I cannot believe that I'm actually talking to creators, writers, artists, and it just keeps coming in now. It's, for me, because I'm not actually a part of the creative aspect of this, that I'm actually doing the interviews, the book reviews, and things of that nature. It kind of is more of a surreal moment for me, because I keep looking back going, am I good enough to keep doing this? Am I going to go ahead and keep doing this? And I always base it on what the fans go ahead and let me know. As long as the fans are happy with what I'm doing, I keep doing what I'm doing. And Rob can attest to this, because we have where the panels will come up, and every single time I'll ask him, are you sure there's not someone else who could sit in the seat that might be able to have a little more insight on this? And it's not because I'm trying to weasel out of something. It's because if I feel like, there may be someone else who could sit in the seat who could have a little more insight than I do. There is a different perspective that I bring into this, because I bring it as a fan and as a member of somebody, actually gets to interview a lot of these people and get different insights. So that's where my insight comes from on my end. So I just try to bring what I can, but I definitely have that laying in the background, am I good enough? Should I keep doing this? Of course, I'm going to keep doing this, but I definitely don't have the mindset of I'm the best there is, the best there was, and they're the best there ever will be. And, you can't do without seeing my show, because that's just impossible to believe that.
Right.
Dennis, do me a favor. Send me a picture while we're on air. I'm going to actually have you as an overlay for when you're talking.
All right, cool.
We're about to get a couple more people in the chat room who want to talk about this, because it's an interesting topic for sure.
No, I love it. It's very interesting. It piqued my interest when you posted the other day. So I definitely want to talk about this. So good job on the topic, man. It's very, very interesting.
And it's great to end on this after 51 panels, to actually beg people to not fake it, because I see a lot of people fake their way in the industry. Here's something I'm going to throw it out right now before anyone else comes in, because I want to get this out in the very beginning part of this video. Do not come in and proclaim that you are going to be the next Stan Lee. Do not proclaim. Do not proclaim you are going to be a legend. Do not proclaim your first comic is the best comic book ever. These are all keywords that anyone who's been around for more than 5 minutes is going to be like, that guy's an asshole. That guy's full of shit.
Pretty much. That's how it goes.
Like, honestly, they don't even know what it took. I remember my first book coming out. I had my son. I knew what it felt like to have a son, but I never had to have my son in my hands the day he was born. He had an umbilical cord wrapped around his neck. They had to race him to NICU. I didn't get to actually hold my son for 24 hours. So I remember the first time I held a comic book fresh off the presses, I had that moment. I had my first baby in my hands, and it was amazing. It was literally taking something, and I'll use Cat Dad and Supermom right now. And even this, the first time I hold one of my books, you just want to hug it. You want to hold it. It's your baby. Because when you see it, here's something, and this is for the fans watching. This is for the readers watching who aren't creators. When we see this and we feel this, we don't see the story. We see the hours of work. We see the sacrifices. We see everything that got in our way. And despite it all, we have a book. We don't see it as a book until someone's buying it and they're celebrating it. That first minute it's off the assembly line, it's not a product. It is actually something born of our creative it's our juices. And I know it sounds a little dirty, we got the demon here, so it works, but it's a little bit of your creative juices born into it's a real boy. It's Pinocchio, and it's just the most exciting thing. So when I hear people are like, I'm gonna be a legend, what page are you on in your book, honey? 14? Legend. Okay, right. You do know Stan Lee didn't use his real name. I'm just asking if you know anything about history. Have you heard of Will Eisner? Just asking for shits and giggles.
Right.
Because not one of those people came in and thought they were going to be who they wound up being, and neither one of them really ever let their heads get too big.
Right.
Some creators have. Neil Adams, I like Neil Adams. I did an interview with him. Nice. He's super nice, but he's cocky. But he's cocky as shit. But you know what they? But you know what they?
Why?
That's what I'm gonna say. You know what they get about what they're saying about cocky is, right?
What's that?
It's not cocky if you can back it up, and that man can back up what he does. He's still doing commercial art.
Sure.
So, you bow. I'm a very rebellious person, but I understand who the kings and queens of this industry are.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you're not bowing to them as a person. You're bowing to the industry that they have helped build. You are part of. You show your respect. You shut your mouth. And when they talk, you don't talk. I think Neil Adams doesn't think I can talk very well because I barely say anything when we have conversations.
He tells the best stories, though.
Yes. I'll just say one thing and he's like, because he's seen me and Jax around enough, and he'll be like, hey, how you doing? I'm like, good. Jax is learning to talk, and he'll be like, oh, yeah, I remember this one time I had to give a speech. And it just, there you go. You're getting history. It's the History Channel, and he's spending a few minutes with you. I remember we were at this one show. I'll be honest with you. He was across from me, and all I saw the entire show was Neil Adams, and I felt like every so often he looked at me. So I was trying to be so good. I'd have a pitch, and if they walked away and I didn't make a sale, I'm like, Neil Adams just wrote that down on my permanent record. But what do you guys think about that? Do you think that the people who come in with big egos are a big problem? And I'm going to bring in Josh Lyman. That is not a dig at him. He just popped in. I have not waited. We're bringing him right in for this question. Josh,
all good.
Not a comment on Josh. Dennis is with us, Josh. If you've been watching, you can't. Yeah, okay. So Dennis is with us. So that's the question. What do you? And me and Josh have talked a little bit about these ego hounds and some of these other panels. So I know Josh has got something to say. So why don't we let Josh go first? And please do that intro.
Oh, well, hi, guys. My name is Josh Lyman. I have been in comic books at least a minimum of 12 years at this time. I've been a full-time illustrator for the last 8 years. That's all that pays my bills between comic books and private commissions and doing conventions along the road. I have taught art classes. I have done creative panels. I have done comic panels, and I've worked with just a little bit of everybody at this point. But I mean, as far as ego is concerned, when you're working on something, sometimes we've discussed this in previous panels where the illusion of greatness versus being, disillusioned by your own story. You think you're the person that can fly higher, and you're just going to have the beeswax melt off of the feathers, and you're just going to come crashing down. And nowadays it's easier to do that. All it takes is just a series of events, and all it takes is for one person to pop it out. And I don't know. I mean, I just came in to kind of give 2 cents on that and a little bit of that. I think that they're more and more with ego that people need to find that sorry, just popped up so randomly. I know you were testing it, but still.
I was trying to get that. He's in the corner now. If you actually look, we have him in the corner. I just hit the wrong button. I'm an idiot. Don't mind me.
But I mean, other than that, I mean, as far as is, pure and simple, the concept of this panel is like, hey, there's the you actually have to work. You actually have to finish it and finish the project. I'm looking at a lot of people, Yep. Yet again, YouTube. YouTube is working a lot quicker than Facebook. Facebook's probably about 2 minutes behind right now. I think they might be filtering it. But yeah. Pure and simple. Hey, I'm actually looking forward to this other guy coming on because I was listening to him on Indie Volt in a second. But yeah, just in general, get it done. Put your time in, do your research, figure out how the industry has changed. And, if you got to self-publish. And if you can find a connection that'll publish it for you so you don't have to put that money in, even more power to you.
And of course, we have the one, the only, Elysian Fields creator. Introduce yourself. We can't hear you. I don't know if you're plugged in all the way.
It's this headset. I can't find the mic, which is unfortunate. But I was gonna see if it worked. Unfortunately, not. How's it going, everybody? Michael Oden, creator, writer of Elysian Fields. You guys have probably heard me and want me to shut up here. Over the past few days, I've done a lot of live streams, and it's been an awesome time being on with Indie Volt and getting to chat with Rob on a few things like the Double Dip and getting on Kickstarter pauses and what have you. It's been a blast. And the moment I saw this panel, I was like, ooh, let me in, because there's a lot to say.
I do want to point out, Michael, you look like the guy who's like, and that's why the boss is the one who I'm communicating and telling you he's a bad guy. You're in the shadows. Don't tell him who I am, Steve.
I apologize. Normally, I would be in a little bit better lighting. I am wearing a company hat, so I'm kind of making sure that logo is a bit obscured because I don't want to get in any trouble at work.
Expressing your opinions,
but just to be safe.
No,
but
yeah.
Anyways, so it's. Ooh, this actually reminds me a bit of the video that you sent me here this morning, that you tagged me in this morning here, Rob.
Well, let's go around the room. We'll open that can of worm. That definitely is a can of worm. I'll let you open up. But we're at the point. I don't know if you saw. We're just talking about the people who come in and are faking it. And
that's what I was going to get to. And
okay.
The comment that was made on there, I felt was disingenuous in a lot of ways, and it misleads people because you take away from what the craft is. But I came into this is my first campaign, and I'm no stranger to comics. I grew up with comics. Have gotten very increasingly more invested as the years go along, to the point where I've done a lot of research on the business side of things, and I freelance, write, and do reviews of books and what have you. And so I remember when I started writing this book, I was scrounging around trying to find things to help me figure out how to write a script. And so I got a copy of there. I lucked out. I had purchased this special edition of Marv Wolfman's Superman, Man, and Superman, which the deluxe edition came with his first draft of his first 2 issues of the script. And so I literally sat there with that thing open, looking through, going back and forth between the pages to learn the language that he would use to describe panels and different viewpoints and what have you. And I would flip back and forth. And that's how I wrote my first script. I had that thing there, and I taught myself how to write a script. You cannot come into this with a half-hearted attitude. There is no version of success that you don't put every single ounce of your every single fiber of your being into this, because it is a very intense process. Writing's just the first step. Writing's the easy part, because then you get to the campaign. First campaign, and I was stupid and I didn't build it up. I didn't market it beforehand. I set up my campaign, and so I built everything while I was going. And there are a lot of mistakes made along the way, but I put my heart and soul into this, and the results are there. I have 160 followers. I have 75% of my flexible goal achieved. Like, you cannot go into this with anything less than 120%.
Yeah, but we're specifically warning about right now, just at this point. Like I said, you might have came in late and not realized. We're talking about the people who come in and say they're going to be the next Stan Lee.
Oh yeah,
You know what I mean?
that's not going to happen without work.
And I want to hear from Demon Phil, because we haven't heard on this from Demon Phil or Dennis, because I want to get those two on the record.
Yeah.
And then I do want to move, like you said, onto that other topic, and we're going to bring in Meredith to actually talk about it, because she was live there. But first, because Meredith's coming in a little late, let's just finish with this round of questions. Demon Phil, the people who talk about being Stan Lee and the next Neil Adams, right away, haven't released a comic book. You're an interviewer. I'm sure you deal with that. How do you handle someone who's like, oh, no, I'm the best in the world?
No, I mean, I haven't dealt with anybody as of yet, but I always go through a prep before I have my interview, just to let everybody know how the tempo is going to be kind of going along with that. Let them know that nothing I do is scripted. There is no drama in my interviews whatsoever. No politics, no religion, no drama, nothing like that. I go through the whole basics. I haven't had any issues, but I do my research prior to getting anybody in there. I have had Michael Oden on my show as an interview and absolutely enjoyed that to no avail. It was great. And he knows, he can attest to this, that we actually had a talk, and he was very excited. I don't know what the word would be, because he was like, you actually looked into everything. I mean, I actually had knowledge about things that were going on before we had the interview process come up. So I do my research to make sure I not only cover myself, but I'm covering the fans that are watching, because I don't want to ever say anything myself that is going to be put out there that the fans are going to look back going, but that's not quite true. You have no idea what you're talking about. So for someone to come out and say that they are the next Stan Lee or something, I'm going to tell you from a fan standpoint right now, the first person I hear that comes up and compares himself to Stan Lee or some of the greats like that, they're not getting any of my attention on that one after that. I'm sorry. I've got mad respect for those that laid the entire foundation in this entire company. And I am gaining much more respect for those who continue that field in doing so, who continue in putting that genuine attitude, the positivity, keeping everything with honor, with loyalty, with respect. I mean, there are certain key values that you have to have in there. And Stan Lee actually laid the foundation for those key values. So anyone else who says they are the next Stan Lee, sorry, those shoes have been filled one time only. They will never be filled again.
Isn't that the truth? Stephen Phil, was that your messenger going off? I could have sworn I heard your messenger going off.
I don't think so.
Dennis, what do you think? The Stan Lee wannabes, what do you make of them?
I mean, people compare me to Stan Lee a lot. I don't know if it's like in a joking manner, but I don't like to.
You cut out there, Dennis. I can't hear you. Like at all.
I'm not hearing him at all.
Can you hear him now?
Anybody?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear him now.
Oh, you kicked out for a minute, Dennis. I couldn't even hear you. So
Where did you guys lose me?
I honestly asked the question. I heard you say Stan Lee. I went to the fridge.
You started to say that you've had other people compare you to Stan Lee, but that's not something that you've ever thrust upon yourself.
Right, of course. I mean, I think being humble is a very big part of this business, and you shouldn't have to talk about your accomplishments. Like, your accomplishments should speak for themselves. So for me, when I meet someone who's like, like a braggart, or like someone who like has a grandiose opinion of themselves professionally, and just like, dude, it's like that's not the best way to start off, because I also realize the company that you keep, because like I meet a lot of people who don't necessarily have the groundwork or don't have like the portfolio, so to say, to even make a comparison like that in the first place. So just put your work in first, like the comparison that comes much later on.
And we're being joined by the one, the only, and I didn't put up his picture, but we actually do have a picture now for you guys to see, and I'm just going to show. For those who don't know what Dennis looks like, this is Dennis, and that's a picture in New York City, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
I can tell that background. That's how much I know home. I know that. That's my city. All right, so Meredith, we're actually going to be talking about something that happened on your show right now. Your show's got
What the hell happened on my show?
Well, I'll leave it into one word, and first I'm going to let you introduce yourself, and then you can kind of explain from your point of view what happened. Here's the word. Here's today's secret word, guys. Storyboard.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, yes. Okay. I'm glad I have my big girl pants on. Hi, guys. I'm Meredith Loughran. I am the comic noob. I also work with Geek Insider and Wild One Forever. I am a writer. I am a content creator. I'm a mess. But once upon a time, not too long ago, Rob Anderson had asked me if I was interested in being part of the Comic Book Advocating Network. And I said, I don't do comics. I don't read them. Not in a long, long time. I would say probably at least 30 years. And it's always been in the back of my head that I wanted to create one. And so I'm on this journey. I have the time. I have the energy. I have the wherewithal to do it. I am not Stan Lee. I will never be Stan Lee. I will never be Josh Lyman. I will never be Rob Anderson. I am going to be me, and this is my journey. And I just wanted to say, hey, thanks for letting me be part of this panel, because I think it's really important as a newbie that's coming into this industry. And I have no reservations about it truly being an industry. I've been in publishing, just not comic books. So it's a learning experience for me. It's very exciting. And I love the idea of doing something for the first time, because it's been a long time since I did something for the first time.
And I will say
for another day, though.
Yeah. That's why we're getting rid of the panel shows. We want to get into specifics.
That'll be panel 69. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Damn it, me without a drink.
So one of the worst things about the fake it till you make it, and look, when I came up, I made mistakes left and right, but I owned it. And I invited people to watch my journey. I was very clear, like Meredith was. I was like, hey, guys, look, I've been following this for 10 years, but I've never made a comic book. Come watch me fuck up. Come watch me on this journey. And there are some people. Dennis was there, one of the first people to follow me, actually. So Dennis has gotten to watch me fuck up the whole way. And be honest about it, but own it. And never, would you ever say, Dennis, I tried to fake my status to be higher than it ever was?
Never. You was a very down to earth guy. You just was eager to learn, eager to get into it. So he was willing to take on any information you could get. You was a hard networker. Like, I knew about you before you knew me, which just shows I was working into your networking and doing the panels and being there. So I just saw you very, very hard working person.
Yeah, and that's what you should be. That's the earn it part. So now we're going to talk about storyboarding. The people who show up into our industry who are here for one reason. They want to make movies. They want to make TV shows. They want to make screenplays, but they're not good enough on their own or don't have the connections. It could definitely one or the other. There are some really good screenwriters who are trying to make comics really badly because they don't understand it. The reason they don't understand it is because of comments like when I was on the Comic Noob. And I was on her first show, and we're trying to teach people. I'm not going to call them out by name, but someone had suggested the only thing comics were good for and what they're really designed for were to be scripts for television and movies.
Wow.
I could have handled it better. I might have gotten a little angry.
Yeah, thanks, Rob.
I might have. And look, it was a long day, okay? She called me. It was like 8 o'clock at night. It was my nap time. I missed the nap. But no, I kind of tore into him a little bit professionally. But I was like that. I think the first thing I said was like, no offense. And that's always means I'm coming with the offense. No offense. What you just said is the most insulting thing you could have said. And I remember someone in the room was like, there goes Robin is in New York. Joe Pesci showed up. But it's very insulting. So Mike had actually asked me what that was because we had talked about it on a stream and he saw it today and he's going to tell you what he thought of it.
Oh, so first, Meredith, I do want to let you know, and I actually did comment on the video, but I do want to let you know that panel was awesome. As somebody that literally just, I'm doing my first book too. We're in the middle of our campaign and what have you. And as somebody who a few months ago was desperately trying to find resources on information to write a comic script and everything like that, your panel would have been insanely helpful. And I think that you coming at it from that angle is awesome. And I think that doing that discussion on scripts is something that should be a repeat thing, because the medium is always evolving, the medium is always growing and pushing, and you're going to have new people that set new precedented gold standards. And so the conversation is always going to be one that moves forward. And so I think that was genius. The big thing that really, really got on me was the comment about comic books being storyboards. And I honestly think that Rob did blow up, but he did handle himself professionally. But I think that he was being too lenient, because the comment that comics are storyboard for film not only is an insult to the comic books, but to film and adaptations. Because when you're doing that conversion, you don't just go into a movie set and let's say somebody was trying to make a movie of The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller. You don't just go into that movie set and throw a copy of The Dark Knight Returns at everyone's face and say, here's your freaking script.
And they better not be fucking photocopying them. If they're using them, they better be buying their copy.
Absolutely. But that's my whole thing, is you don't do that, because there's so much more that goes into it. They're just completely different mediums. They're still visual, but there's so much more. There's so many different rules with making a film than making a comic. You go into an action sequence in a comic, and there are rules you showcase the beginning of an action and the follow through of that action, but you never show the connection, right? There are instances where people break that rule and what have you, but for the most part, that's how you keep combat sequences dynamic. But in films, you have to completely choreograph a fight scene. And so storyboards are a great tool for both comics and film, because they allow for you as a writer to get into the head of your camera, to get in the head of your artist, and learn the things that you need to learn so that you can adequately write out a scene, right? So if you put it from a writing standpoint, when you're writing a comic strip, you can use a storyboard to be okay, this is what kind of POV I want. I want it to have we want it to be over the shoulder of a character, and then we want a wide shot. We want an extra close up. We want a bird's eye view, and it helps you really put those things into perspective, so that way you understand what your artist is going to be doing. I think it's an incredibly helpful tool for making comics, especially for beginners. Back in the day when I had a pipe dream of wanting to draw my own book, that's how I would practice, is I would draw storyboards. And that's what that really helped me on the writing side, of being able to talk about, okay, well, this is the kind of shot that I want to set up, and it translates well, and the artists appreciate it, because I know that the first compliment I got from my artist Marcelo was, I really like how detailed your panel descriptions are. They put a good image in my head for what I want to do. And so I do think storyboards and boards are an excellent tool, but to completely discredit the entire storytelling aspect of a comic book to a storyboard isn't going to have all the detail. It's literally just, you do a few low res images of characters, you set them up in a dynamic. You don't even necessarily have to have the setting set up. You have things written out. They're very rough. They're nothing that I would have in a comic book ever. Right. So to just be oh, well, that's what comic books are. Not at all. Just no.
Well, just for edification for anybody else that was listening to this that didn't watch that panel, this was just a comment that went on during Meredith's thing, right?
Yes. No, this was somebody else completely. This was not her.
So was it a guest or was it a comment that somebody made that was viewing?
It was a guest. It was a guest on the panel.
Okay.
And
later told me I made films, and I reminded him that we were the film noob, we were on the comic noob, and it was important that we told people looking to learn about comic books the difference. And I also pointed out to him that comics came before storyboards, and the first person to use a storyboard was Walt Disney. So there are important facts, and that's your education. That's the important, what Randy says constantly on Indie Volt. Get an education. This guy didn't have an education. And I don't mean going to film school. I mean, if you want to be in comics, it's your responsibility to read the history of comics. You have to do that on your own time. It's not my job to inform you. I should be able to say Will Eisner, and you go, I know who you're talking about. Let's have this conversation. If you can't tell me who Will Eisner is, Neil Adams is, Stan Lee is, even the Wolfman himself, you know, if you can't talk to me about those people, what are you doing having a conversation? Those are some big names that have changed the industry. Yeah, there's some ones that, like Jim Lee is a name that you might know, but you might not know Chris Claremont as much unless you're a real huge X-Men fan. Yeah. So there are some outliers, but there are industry giants that you need to understand. We're going to give it to Dennis Knight, and then we're going to continue around the room. Did you have something to say, Meredith? Because it is your show.
I actually did want to mention that I appreciated that pushback and understanding the difference because, you know, in my head, I don't know the lingo. I'm still learning. Mm-hmm. So, you know, when I think storyboard, I have an image in my head, but I'm not thinking of it as the storyboard like I would for a movie. I'm thinking of it as just a quick draft of what I might want the page to look like. You know, again, I do have some publishing experience, just not in comic books. So I get that. And then just understanding the difference between the storyboard and the thumbnails, that was huge for me. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. And I appreciated that conflict because I don't want everybody on these panels to, you know, interviews or anything like that to just yes me to death. I won't learn that way. So I'll send it back to you, Rob.
Dennis, actually, are you with us?
Dennis.
Yeah, I'm right here. Yeah.
Thoughts on us being constantly compared? And this storyboard thing only started in this millennium when we had this influx after the Avenger movie took off. It was the Avenger movie that brought all these storyboarders in. I've been around comics longer. Josh has been around comics longer. He remembers when this comes in. So did Dennis, I'm sure. You remember these people suddenly starting to show up and pushing this idea that all we are is storyboards. How do you feel about that as someone who's been around long enough to know that's bullshit because we were doing this before they were doing it?
It's super insulting. Like everyone, I'm on the same page as everybody else. It's super insulting. Yes, storyboards are important, but let's not get it confused. Comic books, movies, two different mediums, and just like they both have tools to make them the best that they can be. So it's very important on anybody who wants to get into this business to know the difference, and also like, you know, like Rob, like you said, do your homework. Like know who certain people are. Like, you know, follow their work. Don't just say you know their work, just to say like no physical examples of their work. You know, because like that's my biggest thing when I meet people who are like, I guess more established than myself. Always make sure I know like what they've done, who they are. You know, just like because I do not backwards, but I do my homework on certain people, especially if we're going to do a panel with them. When we work with them, I like to know who I'm working with. You know.
Yep, and that makes absolute and total sense. I want to get to Josh because Josh is the artist in the room right now, who probably has the most amount of experience. What do you think about us being compared completely to storyboards? That we are comic book creators just creating storyboards for movies.
I think the statement in itself comes across as somebody who's been bitter and then been told whether or not their idea was pitchable as a film and was rejected. But speaking as an artist who's worked with a few different writers, you want an unfiltered response on that?
Always.
So a lot of writers, when they first start writing, they either just write unfiltered or they start off with what they learned in school, you know, and I'm talking like past MLA and ALA and all those other wonderful, fun research formats. They like just sit in there and start writing off cuff. But the most visual way of teaching, as far as for writing a script, is by teaching how to do a movie script. Now, the problem with a movie script is that you can't sit there and describe what a character looks like or if the shot is this or that. It's literally supposed to be one page for every minute or at least that's what's suggested to be. And unfortunately, that's what happens is these people go, okay, well, I've read this 24-page comic. Is this a half-hour episode? You know, they transition in this modern world to thinking that. We have a lot of different things because our industry has evolved so much between animation and games and videos and so on and so forth that the lines have gotten exceptionally blurred. So from my opinion, it kind of just goes down to is, yes, I think that person just got rejected one too many times because they were trying to pitch their idea for that kind of content versus actually creating the comic book. And I've mentioned before, sometimes with a story, it's just having a different, a different storyteller. You know, sometimes you're going to have a situation where it's cowboys versus aliens, and multiple comic books have dealt with that topic. And, an entire studio will just buy the rights for it just in case, so that when they make their cowboys versus alien movie, nobody can get sued. But that's a side tangent for another thing. But in short, I think the statement was biased. And I also believe that it's fairly inaccurate. However, as the person who has to work on the visual side, I've gotten my share of some really bad scripts and some really good scripts and some really redundant scripts. And I find that the ones that actually do their best to describe things properly are the ones that I'll most likely want to work on, because I'm not going to spend the extra hours doing concept art if they're not going to pay me to do the concept art.
Makes sense. Demon Phil, as someone who's interviewed a lot of creators, what do you think when you hear someone call comics books simply storyboards for another media?
It has no merit, has no value. It's the same thing as saying you only have kids just to have a tax write-off. I mean, this is your baby that you're making. You've already mentioned that before. So if it's your baby, then why are you going to go ahead and just throw another label on it right then and there? That's very demeaning for someone to do that. And usually you say things out of that because it's something that you fear. So I will agree with Josh and what he was saying, that there was some kind of a backstory on that possibly. But overall, it's just a matter of, what was the point? It was almost like it was just strictly a trolling measure is all it was. There was no merit to the question being asked. I mean, there are a lot of questions. I know there's the whole thing about there is no such thing as a stupid question. People are pushing that on a daily basis, almost hourly, minutely. I don't know. We're getting up there in these times nowadays. But for something like that, I'm sorry, but that has no merit. And if you had something where you could actually at least go back and forth with some kind of a debate on it or something, would be one thing. But there is no debate on that one. It's taking your baby and going in and slapping a whole different label on there, which, I mean, there's nothing there. Yes, there are movies that are there and they're doing very well. There are comics that are there that are doing very well. There are anime that are doing very well. There's soundtracks over here that are doing very well. So you're going to go ahead and say that it's only made for one of these purposes here? Well, okay, in the Sith world, that works fine because you only deal in those measures like that. But in comics and in movies and in music and all that, it can be moved around to different mediums, but only if it is taken that way, only if it is adapted that way. It is never made for one particular medium and one particular medium only. George Lucas never thought by making his Star Wars movies that he would ever be in the comic books as much as he is now. And that's a backwards medium of what we're talking about. So are we saying that George Lucas was only good to make comics? I don't believe that one.
I mean, if you read some of those early Star Wars comics, they're pretty bad, though.
Well, I will give you that, yes.
I'm just saying, devil's advocate thing. That was in cross promotion. That was comic books going, hey, we could try and make some movie money here, like we made these toy monies. Let's try and do the same thing in their contracts with Mattel and Hasbro and all that else. But again, that comes down to is it's cross industry. You know, sometimes you don't have the lore, the back history, or anything else, and you just got to hire some dude and go make some stuff up. Just make it work. As long as it kind of looks like this, it's fine. You know, it's like comparing the Transformers colors themes in the comic books by Marvel versus the actual cartoon or the later on canon designs for films and things and whatnot. But I digress again. I apologize.
All right, guys, believe it or not, we're running out of time. So I want to be honest and just reach out to everyone. We've done a lot of these panels, and the whole reason was leading up to this moment. You need an education, as Randy Zimmerman says, or as I say, you got to do your homework. Either way you slice it, if you want to be part of this industry, you got to be reading books. I didn't even try to look up. These are just books that I keep right next to me all the time. You have Survival Guys, you have Metal and Holly Rising's Kickstarter for the Independent Creator, DC Essentials, which, you know, it's not necessarily the best in the world, but it was interesting to learn a perspective, and including Stan Lee's How to Draw Your Own Comics. These types of books, while they're not gospel, they give you insight to what other people were thinking in the industry. The more you read, because I have literally a case in the garage, probably a long box of books on comic books from the last decade that I've read. And I'm not a big reader. I don't like books. I love comic books. I don't like reading books because of my dyslexia. So I also have a slew on my audio player, Audible, where I have been listening to the comics book history, all that. And I do all that to better understand the industry I want to be part of. Managers go out for management training to be in the industry of retail. Yet every comic book creator thinks all they need to understand is what they're doing in themselves. And then they wonder why they don't do anything. And the one thing that I want to talk to Dennis about real quick, and then I want you to tell everyone where to follow you. Dennis, how many people have we seen come and go over the years?
I ran out of figures. I stopped counting a long time ago. It's like, it's one thing to make a comic book, but it's not thing to stay relevant and stay active in the comic book industry. Two very different things. How do you stay relevant? You work hard. You constantly, like, not constantly putting stuff out, but like you want to work on projects. You want to work with other people. You want to keep your name in the mix, because it's like, you make one comic book and that's all you do, then you're going to be forgotten very, very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this, and then we're going to go around the room and say goodbye. Really quickly, an issue number 1 gets you to be taken serious, and issue number 2 makes us actually pay attention to you. I just want you guys to understand that. Having one issue, we're like, oh, look what you did. We're cheering you on. But it takes a lot more than just having one issue for us to really start to be like, hey, this person's serious about what they're doing. Because we have seen it. Many people come in, they leave, one issue, that's it, they're done. So Dennis, tell them where they can follow you. Let's get that graphic up for you.
You can follow me on Twitter at Mr. Night Writer. You can also follow me on Facebook. I have a comic book donor page. I also have a Facebook page, and I'm on Instagram, DEE Night Writer.
All right. Demon Phil.
Hey, Demon Phil, Comics and More New Jersey. You can find me on Comics and More New Jersey on Facebook and on YouTube for all of my videos that are on there. I do book reviews. I do interviews. I do a ton of interviews, actually, and love doing it. And then, of course, the marketing that I do for the crowdfunding as well. If you're interested in doing a book review or getting on for an interview, send me a message. Let me know what's going on. As long as you've got passion in your work and you're willing to go ahead and show me that you've got the values, I'm willing to have you on the show. That's my only stipulation.
Dan, just to answer Dan Lee's question real quick, and let me get that off to you, Phil. Dan Lee wants to know, I want to see where people say they are their next Stan Lee and they say they are legends. Here's the real simple answer. Just be part of the comic book industry and pay attention. It's going to happen over and over and over and over again. Every year, we see a dozen people at least saying this. I'm sure Demon Phil has heard a couple people talk about how legendary they're going to be already. He knows one person I know exactly who we're both thinking of. I know Josh has spoken on it. Dennis definitely knows from the New York crowd. We know a couple people from New York Comic Con who have, Dennis, right? Who just kind of showed up and they were like, I'm the next big thing. And they're no longer around.
Very true.
Yeah. Meredith, have you seen that yet? You're the comic noob. Have you seen the people going around acting bigger than they honestly are?
That you find that everywhere, so I don't think that's unique to comic books.
Michael, you're
it's
the other
everywhere. You know,
Michael.
I mean, even writers, you know, they're like, "Oh, I want to be the next J.K. Rowling." It's like, shut up.
Oh, so you want to rip off other people's ideas?
Yeah.
30 years prior and write it badly.
As a writer, I never wanted to rip anything off. As a matter of fact, when I saw 50 Shades of Grey, I was like, I'm not doing anything like that. I'm going to do the exact opposite. I'm going to write a good book. So, Michael, what did you think? What do you think?
You know, I'm fortunate as one of the newer people in the industry. I haven't met as many of the industry heads. I think I've met like I've seen like one or two people that'll compare themselves to to some greats, and you know, I served for 6 years, and you always meet some jackass with a self-inflated ego that treats themselves like the next Stan Lee, like the next Audie Murphy, like the next this, the next that. And 9 times out of 10, those guys are blowhards that don't go anywhere. So like it just is what it is. Like you can tell if somebody like Dennis, who's mentioned that people have approached him and compared him to those people, that's how you know that you've made something of yourself. Because you have people who are invested enough in the things that you have done to approach you about it. They have made that decision for themselves based upon the work that you have done. That's when you can start. Like, and even then, I still would never, like, even if I had somebody come and compare myself, and I know that Dennis he doesn't either, but like, if that comparison was ever made, it's a great compliment. But I would never put that on a business card. Like, because it's one thing for that connection to be made by somebody else to you, but it's completely other thing to try and promote yourself. Like I grew up wanting to like idolizing people like McFarlane. Am I ever going to say I'm the next Todd McFarlane? Hell no. I don't make $3 million off of a Kickstarter on an action figure that's been remastered. Not at all. And I will probably never get to that point, but I'm going to work really hard and get people to get books.
Yeah, so I definitely want to stress this, Dan. Just stick around. It happens a lot more, and it makes us. And Dan and me, when he first one time he'd actually told me, I was like, I'm going to be a legend, and I'm like, you have to make a book first. Don't tell people that. I gave him nice advice. I was like, don't do that. It'll hurt your career, because I know a lot of people who hate when people do that. And it's nothing against anyone. Even talking about your own book, you learn this. And I'm going to give this advice to the noobs in the room. And Josh and Dennis will know this. You learn at a certain point in your career, you can't talk about how your book is better than anyone else's unless you can back it up. Someone else has said it and you can quote them, or the other book is just absolute trash. So if you don't know a book, you can't compare yourself. I can compare myself to 50 Shades of Grey because, trust me, I've been out long enough that people have read it and told me I am better. So I'm using their words, not mine. When you're using your own words, you're just, like everyone said here, you're inflating your status, but it could be dangerous. And it's not to say you won't be a legend. There are some people who show up and they do become fucking legends. But it's going to make your trip harder. That's it. Mm-hmm. And that's the don't fake it. For Dan's credit, though, I got to say he's putting out what looks to be a very interesting book. I'll give him some love on that. And he says it in fun. So, you know, just be careful with that. Meredith, also tell me.
I just wanted to add. Yeah, okay, I will. I just wanted to add to that, though, because it's okay to say that you're a legend if it's in your inside voice. You know, don't say it out loud, because there's some things, you know, it's important to have those affirmations and to build up your self-esteem and everything like that. But if you're actually saying that out loud, you know, people think that you're freaking crazy. Anyway, I'm Meredith Loughran. I am the Comic Noob. You can find me on Facebook. You know, for the purpose of the show, you can find me on the Comic Noob and on Comic Book Hating Network. So that's comicbookadvocates.com, which is Rob's network. And I have a show tomorrow at 7 p.m. My special guests are Luke Stone, Chuck Pinot, Ted Davies, and Brian K. Morris. I've got room for one more seat. The topic is pitching a story to an editor. So I hope you guys tune in tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern.
I'll be in the audience.
That's it.
I'll be in the audience. I don't belong on that show. I upset your last guest. I'm giving myself a timeout. Bad Rob. Out of the room. Josh.
I like Bad Rob.
So do I. Josh, tell them where they can find me.
Guys, you can find me at Art of Josh Lyman on Instagram and Facebook, and occasionally on Twitter. Not so much on Twitter because it's just a repeat of all the stuff I post everywhere else. I do live drawing. I work professionally, and I'm open at this time for professional gigs. Let's talk. You know, it gives me something to do while I'm not doing shows. And other than that, I do live stream art where I'm working on commissions and stuff. And I'll have a live openings tomorrow. So, yeah.
Demon Phil.
Demon Phil, Comics and More New Jersey. Like I said, Comics and More New Jersey on Facebook, YouTube. You can find me on there, see the videos and everything. doing the interviews, doing the book reviews, doing the crowdfunding marketing, if you need help with that as well. Kind of a jack of all trades, or a demon of all trades, shall we say. I'm here all over the place. If you haven't seen me on here, you haven't been looking close enough.
And Mike, send us off. I think you're the last one. Mike's the last one to say goodbye, right? Dennis and all of us all say goodbye?
I think so.
All right. So I'll come right back on. Mike, tell them how to follow. Tell them about your Kickstarter. Give them the pitch.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Michael Oden, you can find me on Twitter at Elysian Fields _0. And we have our Indiegogo campaign running right now. The pitch of the book is fate shackled Achilles in life. In death, he was finally free until a mysterious calling took him from his peace, and he is forced to fight as a champion for Hades in a tournament that crowns the ruler of the underworld every 1,000 years. It's going to be a fun book. We are looking to have all the first wave of books shipped out in July. And we're, as I said, 77% funded, 162 backers. Get in there and help us hit 7K.
All right. And that's it, guys. We're going to be ending the panels very strong. Thank you all for being here for the very last panel that was part of this 4 p.m. block. Tomorrow's something new, and next week is entirely new. Meredith, if you want to talk about where your show will wind up in that block, by all means, tell them where your show's now going to be airing starting next week, not this week, next week.
Yes, tomorrow is going to be at the 7 o'clock time slot, but we were talking with the Comic Book Advocates Network, and we decided that we were going to move to the 4 o'clock spot and give some value, hopefully, to the masses. We're going to try and network and use all of our networks together to build an audience, a following, and support one another. So that moves from, I think that's the 29th. Is that the date? The 29th.
Yes, it would be the 29th.
Yes. So instead of being the 7 o'clock slot, we are moving down to the 4 o'clock slot.
Yeah.
Which is fine because I really don't have that much of an audience anyway right now.
We'll get you that audience. So people love
just keeping it humble,
But it also, people love to watch the journey. And some of my problem is that my journey's gotten a lot further along than for the newer people who I'm a little more advanced in the conversations we're having, where I'm no longer talking about the basic stuff because I almost forgot to talk about it. So it's great that we have you on the network now. And I thank you for exposing your journey to the public, because sometimes it can be a painful process. So I really hope that people will put my feet to the fire, and hold me accountable, because I'm going to hold myself accountable. I have goals and things like that. I set myself a deadline for 1 year out to start the process and get a comic book published. We'll see. Now, yeah, and we have a lot of great programming. I want to thank everyone who's been on any of these panels. 51 later, Josh has been on a bunch. Demon, Phil, you've been there. Mike's came on in the last couple of weeks. Meredith, of course. Randy, Varian, Chuck, Travis, Eric, who's been on a bunch of these. I know I'm forgetting people, and I apologize. Brian K. Morris, of course, very special place in all of this. He's part of it. Luke Stone as well, all part of the Advocating Network. Josh for the cover. We wound up getting a cover for Cat Dennis Her Mom. So many amazing things have happened. We're ending this simply because it's time to look for what the new normal is going to look like for all of us. And it's about maturing. Every season we start new videos, but I really will always look back on this time of my life as not a scary thing, but that time in my life where I got to go meet with my friends once a day at 4 p.m. and talk about the industry. I will never forget that. So my memories of this time will have a lot to do with that. So thank you all, and thank you all who showed up. I really appreciate you. And thanks for Josh for making us level up our look. We're kind of shabby there for a while, and Josh inspired all the great looks of this show. So thank you, Josh, for that.
No worries.
And I guess we're out of here. Thank you all for tuning in. And remember to be kind. Well, that was.
Remember to be kind and share.